Hello all, thank you so much for joining. I think we're going to give it a few more minutes for a couple more people to join and then we'll get started.
Buenos días, vamos a empezar en unos minutos para esperar que los demás se puedan ir uniendo.
Again, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Just one more minute to give a chance to anyone that may have some challenges logging in. Vamos a esperar un minuto más por cualquier otra persona que tenga algún inconveniente en hacer login. Gracias por su paciencia. One more minute, un minuto más. Okay, Michael, I think that was appropriate enough, and we're at 19 attendees, so you may start whatever you deem appropriate.
I am ready if you are. Thank you everyone for joining. Today we are going to go through portals for business automation, and thank you Icon for hosting and co-sponsoring our event together here. The total event should take about, 35, 40 minutes, and then I will save time after in case there's any questions. I will do my best to monitor the chat and the questions on the GoToMeeting, so feel free to put anything in there as we're going through, and I'll do my best to address those if there's a pause or a convenient time in the presentation. As a matter of introduction, my name is Mike. I head up business development for DynamicPoint. And again, thank you for your time. We'll go ahead and get started. Our agenda as far as today, we're going to go through a little bit of introduction on who we are and what it is that we do. And then we're going to go through several demonstrations. And the demonstrations are all showcasing our portal application for both a vendor and a customer perspective, and using this portal framework to introduce business automation using Office 365 tools. And then we'll do a closing, and then we'll wrap it up, and that'll be it. So fairly brief agenda, pretty fast pace. We're going to go through it fairly quickly today. Just an introduction of who DynamicPoint is. So DynamicPoint is a software development company that creates apps on top of Office 365. So we are very much embedded in that platform, and all of our products reside on the Office 365 framework. The development approach is very similar to, like a mobile application that you would add to your phone. I'm sure we've all installed applications on our phones before, and when we do so, the application asks if you could use our camera and our location and things like that and send us notifications. And that, of course, is that product using the framework of the mobile device. And from a software development perspective, we very much do that same thing, but we are based on this Office 365 framework. We've been around since 2009, which is a little longer, or Office 365 didn't exist then, so we grew up building custom applications as well as SharePoint on-premise, and now all of our focus is on our Office 365 apps. So that's a little intro to us. An introduction to the portal app that I will showcase today. So the portal app is taking this concept of an Office 365 SharePoint extranet, right? So back in the day, if you're familiar with SharePoint, it used to be targeted more towards internal users within your company. And then with Office 365, Microsoft has introduced this concept of an external user, or sometimes known as B2B sharing. And what B2B sharing enables is the ability for outside companies to come into my Office 365 resources and use them for collaboration. The other nice thing about this B2B sharing concept, or this license, is it doesn't cost me anything. I'm not required to pay extra for it, or I'm not limited on how many external users I could have. So Microsoft has made this very advantageous because it is included with your subscription. There's not a separate cost for it. So we're starting with a SharePoint portal, right? And what we're adding to this is an application that we have developed that allows us to hook up to data that resides within various systems. So if you're using a Microsoft Dynamics product or an outside application, we could hook into that system. And what that gives us also the ability to do is hook into that data and then render that on the portal. Now, depending on the type of user, if it's like a vendor, then we're going to show such things as like purchase orders. If it's a customer, we're going to show such things as sales orders, or maybe inventory or customer invoices, etc. So depending on the audience, it obviously impacts the data that we would like to bring into this portal, this secure portal, and collaborate with these external users. Then Microsoft provides a lot of these other tools that come with your Office 365 subscription, including forms and workflow and Power Apps and Power BI, that gives us the ability to make that even better, right? To sort of extend that solution and make it more than just a portal, but also as a framework for automating business processes. And that's what's going to be our real focus for today, is how we could use not only this framework for collaboration, but to take something that was previously done manually and apply workflow and then automate it. So some of the objectives, what am I, why am I giving an employee to my users, whether they be customers, vendors, or employees? And here are just some of the more popular examples that we see. From a customer perspective, managing company information, sharing contracts and agreements, order entry, inventory, product details, payment processing, help desk if you're more of a service organization. From a vendor side, managing terms and conditions, company information, confirming purchase orders, request for proposals, confirming shipments. And then an employee side is generally more internal focused, handbooks, time entry, project management, oversight to company operations, and reporting. So again, the portal is it's a very flexible framework. And what we'll see through the course of today is, how it ends up being configured is really dependent on the type of business you are, if I'm a manufacturing company, if I'm a service organization, et cetera, as well as who is the targeted users for that application. So we're going to start off with our first demo. And I'm going to leave this PowerPoint slide here. And we are going to look at, first of all, our customer portal. And our customer portal, as you can see, is using an Office 365 SharePoint site, of which our app has been added to it. And I have configured it to highlight certain integrations, again, with that ERP data. So here you can see I am looking at sales orders, the ability to create new orders, look at invoices, manage my company information or my profile, as well as I've included an Power BI report here, highlighting some of the details of this customer. In this case, they happen to be a reseller, so I'm showing them a scorecard, as well as a document library, so I could use this to collaborate on documents. Of course, I could drill into any of these and begin editing them, etc. And then at the very bottom, I've included an event calendar, just showing some upcoming events that are going on with my company that I want to share with my customers. So the first thing to know about these portals are built on your Office 365 instance, right? So the branding, the look and feel is really up to you. And Microsoft gives us what they call a lookbook, which is essentially templates that we could use to change the look and feel of these portals. So if I go through these, there's various templates, and of course I could pick whichever design I want to get started. And then that serves as sort of the foundation of the portal. Now I have the look and feel, and then I could add the data that I want to collaborate with the user, in this case a customer, based on configuration of how I could tie that into my ERP or my Microsoft Dynamics information. So if I were to click on sales orders, what this is doing is retrieving the orders for the customer that is logged in. So now they could go see their own orders, view them, drill into them, look at maybe details on the line item, etc. So they have full access to their information in a 24/7 self-service fashion, right? So they could look at their orders, they could look at the details. In this case, I've also given them the ability to print a sales order report. So they could get a formatted report and then go ahead and save it or print it, download it, whatever they want to do. So the way to think of the portal is a window into the information that exists in my accounting system. It is not a replacement. We are not moving it to the portal. We are merely showing it in a live query fashion. So that was the ability to see my orders. I could also go into my same service, but in this case, I've configured it for edit. So a customer could come in here and change maybe the delivery address of an order that has not shipped yet and update it. And any update that you see is a live update or can be a live update to my data as it exists in my order system. So any of the interaction here can be real time, or it could require workflow for review and approval. Now I just updated that simple order. If I were to go look at my email now, you could see I am sending a notification that that data was tracked or changed, right? So we are tracking each of these changes, and I'm sending an email notification here that's capturing the user that was logged into the portal and what data was changed. You also know I have the ability to create an order here. The creation will call the order entry logic from Microsoft Dynamics, and pass constants and variables such that it is a simplified order entry experience. So you can see here's all the defaults coming directly from Microsoft Dynamics, and then I could go add various line items, and it's going to give the items that are configured for me, as well as the price lists and everything else that's configured. So I could go ahead and create these orders and interact with them without having to build this order entry logic anywhere else, because it is using the business logic that has already been configured in Microsoft Dynamics. So the unit price obviously defaulted and things like that. And then if I want, I could submit this order for it to be fulfilled. And by submitting this order, it's going directly into the ERP application, and I'm, of course, receiving a notification that the order has been updated. As well as here's the new order I just created. So any of the data that's available in your system can be included on the portal. So I've talked about sales orders. I can include invoices here. Invoices I could also pay. If I want to pay an invoice, we have integrated with various payment services. So I could go ahead and enter my credit card information and pay an invoice directly from the portal as well. So if you were to take that same idea and apply it to a vendor, it's the same product, it's the same foundation, but now we've configured it a little bit different for the sake of a vendor. As opposed to showing sales orders, I'm now showing things like purchase orders and invoices and things like that. I'm probably not going to give my vendors the ability to create a purchase order, but maybe they could go in and update it or acknowledge it. Do such things as change expected delivery dates and then acknowledge the PO. Maybe I want to give them the ability to print it. Of course, it's not going to call a sales order report, it's going to print the purchase order report. Or upload any documentation, so they could add, say, a quote, if they want to go ahead and upload that directly from the portal. So in this case, the portal is serving, not only for a place for me to include documentation and analytics and reports, but also to include that information as it's coming from my ERP system, right? So I could expose any of that data and begin opening it up to either customers or vendors such that they could collaborate with that information. I don't have to send them emails anymore, or they don't have to call me and ask me questions, because now they could go look at it whenever they want. So moving forward. So what we were covering thus far is this idea of the portal to share data and to share reports, right? So the concept is this self-service access system where people who would not have access to that information otherwise, because they don't have logins to my ERP application, but they could come in and see that information in a secure fashion. And what I want to add to that is some of the flexibility with Office 365. Office 365 gives me a lot of tools, including workflow, forms, reporting, Power Apps, AI Builder, and I could begin introducing workflows and using an Office 365 SharePoint site, not only for data sharing, but also moving upstream here and using it for business automation. So I have a couple sample workflows that I've created that I could take you through that shows you how we could use this framework for more than just sharing data, but for applying automation. So the first process I'm going to take you through is a vendor onboarding process. Basically entails 3 major steps here. 1, I'm going to request to work with a new vendor. And this is going to be completed by someone within inside the company, and they're going to, identify a new vendor that they want to do business with. Step 2, I'm going to send that vendor an invitation. And on that invitation, I'm going to include all of the documentation that they need to complete in order to do business with my organization. Step 3, a manager is going to approve this, and upon their approval, I'm automatically going to create that vendor record in my Microsoft Dynamics system. So the whole process has been automated. The request, the vendor completing their documentation, as well as the integration with the ERP, as well as the approval. So let's go through one of those. So I'm going to go to my vendor portal, and I'm going to kick off the request to work with a new vendor. And as I mentioned, this would probably be completed by someone internally, maybe a manager. And I'm going to put myself as that new vendor, and I'm going to submit it. So that was someone with inside the company, and now they put in their request to work with this new vendor. And in a minute, I should receive a new email with the documentation that I need to complete. So sometimes it takes a second to come through here. Oh, looks like I got it. I should have sent a new one here. Maybe I sent it to the wrong place. Add new vendor. Dynamic point. Okay.
You missed the name. I think you missed a letter.
Did I? Morrison.
The N in dynamic.
Well, that would explain why I never got it. Just to prove to you that it is a real demo and I'm not faking it, right? Okay. Okay, I got it now. Thank you. All right, so that sent me as a vendor this email. And this email, as you can see, is using an integration with DocuSign to capture a contract that I need to complete to work with this company. So if I click on this review document button, it is going to open up the form that I need to complete. So it contains my address and contains a couple banking information so I could pay this new vendor, the type of company I am, as well as I've included a government form that needs to be completed and an electronic signature. So this is the vendor doing that, right? I'm being several people today, so it's a little hard to follow sometimes, but I am now the vendor who's complete, or the proposed vendor who's completing their aspect of the onboarding process. And if I finish this, if you recall to my workflow, it then needs to be reviewed by someone internally. So if I were to go open up my email here, you could see I now have a new notification that is using this approval action, which I could approve or reject, and it contains a link to the completed form that just got filled out. So if I click that link, I can now review it, make sure the vendor did everything correctly, and then I could approve or reject it. In this case, I'm going to approve it, and then it's going to do a couple things. It's going to send an email to the vendor welcoming them to the company, right? Congratulations, you've been approved. And as well as that, it's going to create the vendor in the accounting system for me. So here's the email I just got. I could have made it prettier, so don't hold that against me, but I put, you're now a new vendor in our system. To access the portal, click the following link, and now they could click this link and sign on directly to the portal. So they now have access to the portal. So that was this process, right? It was the vendor request, it was the onboarding forms completed, and then the workflow integration and automatic creation of that vendor in the accounting system. If I were to show an example from a customer perspective, so this is similar idea, but now I'm focused more on the customer perspective, I could use the concept of a contract expiring or expiration. So I want to notify the customer of that their contract is due for renewal, and I want to send them an invite to renew it. And then step 2, I need to get them to fill out some paperwork and some contract. So they're going to provide all their details and complete that contract. And then in step 3 in my example, it's the same thing from an internal reviewer. So a manager will go ahead and review this. And then I want to update the accounting system with the new details of that contract, such things as the expiration, the terms of the contract, etc. So very similar in nature to my previous example, but I'm focusing more on the customer side of it this time. So in this case, I'm going to go to my customer portal, and I'm going to look at the contracts that I have, again, filtered for my user. And I've included the expiration date. So let's say that this one is about to expire, and I'm going to go ahead and choose to renew it. And as I mentioned, renewing a contract just isn't as simple as clicking on a button. I need to capture some documentation from them. So you can see here I received a simple notification saying you're going to get an email. You could close this screen. And if I were to go ahead and open up my email, again, I've received a invitation or a document that needs to be completed using DocuSign. If I were to go ahead and open that, I can now review the terms of my customer agreement. So I could go through my agreement and again, accept it by placing my electronic signature on it. By them completing this, it'll then go once again to that internal person, whether it be a sales manager or an account manager, is going to get a notification that they have a new contract that needs to be reviewed. So now being that internal person, I could see this task. By the way, this is using a Microsoft Power Automate task, which if you're using Teams, you could also manage there as well. So if I open up Teams, you'll see that same request in my activity feed on Teams with the ability to click on that contract, which has been saved in SharePoint. So I could review it, make sure my customer signed it and everything looks good. And then I could approve it and say this is perfect and approve it. And when this gets approved, I again send the customer a notification letting them know that their contract has been renewed and thank you. So that's the email going to the customer. And if I were to open up the contracts, and if you remember which one I clicked on there, if I were to refresh the screen, you would see that it has been updated directly in the ERP for another year. So now the term of the contract has been extended because the customer chose to renew it and complete the appropriate documentation. So these were just a couple examples, right? These don't have to fit yours exactly, but to give you some idea of what's possible of using this framework of a customer portal in conjunction with the supporting Microsoft technology. In this case, I brought in some Power Automate. I brought in electronic signature being provided by DocuSign. You don't have to use DocuSign. There's other tools out there as well. But as you can see, it's providing the framework for automating things that were maybe being done manually or via email before, and now it is providing a workflow to do those and complete those tasks for me. So going back to my presentation, there is some further reading on this, and we could go ahead and include these when we send out the presentation. But Microsoft provides some documentation on how to build these portals, as well as using SharePoint for external collaboration, as well as our website. So again, a lot of different examples there in documentation to read from to learn more about this topic of using SharePoint and Office 365 for collaboration with outside parties. And as I mentioned, it would take me, about a half an hour to get through it. So if there's any questions, I could be happy to go through those. And I will go ahead and turn it back to you, Carlos.
Thank you, Michael. Bueno, los que hablan español, bueno, ahora vamos a abrir para preguntas. Creo que hay una casilla ahí en la aplicación en la que pueden hacerlas y podemos contestar cualquier pregunta que tengan sobre lo que hemos visto.
Ok, en esencia, para recap un poco, los productos están desarrollados sobre la plataforma SharePoint de Microsoft. En este caso, ambas, las primeras soluciones son sites de SharePoint expuestos fuera, de modo que pueden ser accesibles por los clientes o suplidores. Son productos muy focalizados, no pretenden ser una cosa muy compleja, pero sí son productos que los pueden habilitar con relativamente muy corto tiempo, prácticamente plug and play, a dar acceso a sus clientes y suplidores, pero particularmente a los clientes a una especie de autoservicio. O sea que esos son los requerimientos técnicos, por así decirlo. For those English speaking, I guess the whole presentation, I was just making some things clear for Spanish speaking audience. Puedo continuar, Carlos. Any questions? You might type that there's a box on the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a little triangle that says attendees, audio, webcam. There's one of the questions. Just clicking there and expand. You may type a question.
¿Alguna pregunta? Michael, I don't know if they have access to speak or the questions need to be typed on the box.
They do need to be typed, but we can unmute everyone, I believe, if you'd like to do so.
Yeah, vamos a quitar el mute para que puedan hacer la pregunta en voz.
Si quieren hacerla hablando.
We're going to unmute, so there may be a voice question. We kindly ask that those who are not talking or asking questions, please mute yourself.
¿O se entendió todo o no se entendió nada?
Okay. Everyone should be able to unmute if they'd like to talk.
Okay, si alguien tiene una pregunta y la quiere hacer en voz, puede darle unmute y...
And then I did get the question that came through, and that was, do we have payment portal link with Dominican provider republics as far as Azul? And the answer is yes. That company, I believe, is actually part of American Express, if I recall, or maybe a different provider. I might be mixing those up. But we have mapped to that payment service as well.
La pregunta para traducir fue si había procesamiento de pagos online con los procesadores locales dominicanos, y la respuesta fue que sí, que se ha integrado con Azul el procesamiento de pagos.
Hola Carlos, ¿me escuchas?
Sí, ¿qué tal, Roberto?
Todo bien, todo bien. Carlos, mira, fue yo que hice la pregunta sobre
Ujú,
si el portal se puede vincular con Azul, ¿verdad? Porque sería importante. Y la
ujú,
segunda sería en el demo, cuando él hace el trigger de pago,
ujú,
él lo está haciendo a una factura existente.
ujú.
¿Pudiese darse la posibilidad que de repente yo genere, en vez de factura, yo genere un quote y que la persona seleccione ese quote para pagar? Porque aquí en Dominicana específicamente, tú sabes,
Ujú.
cuando se llega al tema de facturación,
Sí,
yo
muy
veo
buena
que
pregunta.
hay algunos términos fiscales, como si tú vas a requerir
Sí,
comprobante, tú sabes, ese tipo de cosas.
claro. Entonces, para entender bien, esa sería como un prepago, porque si no hay una
Claro.
factura,
Sí, sí,
sería un
eso quiere
prepago.
decir.
Okay,
Exacto, sería un prepago.
Michael, the question is about they have several customers that need to pay in advance, so they don't have the invoice yet generated on the ERP. So is there a way to pay on a quote? Let's say you quote the customer and they paid on that quote without being invoiced first. It's like a prepayment.
Yeah, the reason being, I'm sorry to expand on that, as soon as you issue an invoice in Dominican Republic, that invoice is under the eyes of the IRS. It's called the GII in the Dominican Republic, and it has a special number. It's similar to Mexico.
Uh-huh.
So, so many customers, many of our customers, many distributors, commerces, they issue a quote, and when the customer pays the quote or tells you, I deposited it, you check the deposit, then you do that. So for this, instead of having issued all the invoices for the week, maybe issue all the quotes that are supposed to be invoiced. And is that too difficult to set up something like that?
No, from our perspective, when we integrate with the payment providers, we're passing the line items, and the total of what is included on the transaction. So if that's coming from a quote, that's fine for us as well. So obviously the more typical example is the invoice, but
Of course, yes.
it could be from anything that honestly includes an amount.
Right. So
So
yeah. So you could expose. Would be fair to say that you could expose any document within SOP in GP.
correct.
Okay.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
okay, perfect.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's an important question. I have a follow-up there. If we're reading from the SOP table, is there a possible, because you mentioned that what integrates with the payment provider is the line item, but what would happen if we include discounts and taxes that are not in the line item, that are in the total SOP amount? Could that field be integrated to the payment processing system?
The total amount, correct?
Total amount of the document.
Yes. So here, let me show you. I'll go back. Okay. So if we were to look at an invoice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the working on the invoices is getting that information, like you said, from the sales order processing table of all the invoices.
Mm-hmm.
When we click pay, we get to decide through configuration what data we're passing to a payment provider, right? So we're clicking this pay button.
Mm-hmm.
I could take, this and this and this. Well, shoot, I don't have a total on mine, but if I had a total here, I could include that. And that is what gets passed to that payment provider. So as soon as I click that button, it is passing the details and rendering it in their screen, right? This is a framed screen that shows their payment transaction. So here I have the invoice, I passed the quantity and the amount and the total, but if there was any discounts, I could show them here, and then they get to pay using their card.
Correct. And that discount field would come from our SOP table, right?
Correct, right? We are not storing any of that data. We're merely passing it to the payment provider.
Okay. Okay.
So it's in the configuration, if I were to open up the configuration, you'd basically see it's a mapping of certain fields to the payment provider. So when I click that, just saying what fields do we want to pass. Some of them are required, obviously. They need an amount, they need a customer, right? There's certain things that are required, but then there's other things that are optional, like discounts and things like that.
Okay, okay, that makes sense.
So any data that would be available from GP's perspective, right, in the payment details, I could map to that payment transaction.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And is it possible, let's say, when I click on payment, before I'm directed to the payment portal, can there be a pop-up that may enable me to ask some questions to the customer? Let's say a simple yes or no question, because we were saying later on regarding the invoicing in Dominican Republic is that before you invoice, you're required to ask your customer if they want certain type of invoices. And let's say we have type A and type B, which we know as con comprobante or without comprobante. Is there a possibility for the customer to click on the quote and before he's directed to the payment portal, have a pop-up that asks that question and he would just click yes or no?
I think that will, Carlos, I think that will come from the customer profile.
Yeah, but I believe this they have customers that have both types. Let's say a customer that probably one time will ask consumidor final and the other time will ask for crédito fiscal. That's what you're asking, Roberto, right? Because
yeah,
in GP you can put one type alone in the customer card, but you're talking about cash customers that may ask you for one type or another, even given time. That's what you're asking, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that possible, Mike?
So I think there would be a couple places that we could put that. One on the payment screen itself, right? That would be the option. The other option is on the invoice, right? Maybe we put that drop down here. And then maybe the third option is, maybe we have these buttons I could relabel.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we have two payment buttons, right? So they could click a different button, which would basically answer that question for us. So if I had, lack of a better word, payment one, payment two, that by them clicking on that, they're actually deciding that option based on which button they clicked on. So I think there would be several ways that we could capture that prior to opening up the payment screen.
Okay.
Or if it was on their customer profile, of course, we wouldn't have to ask them. But if you want to present them with the option, I would say, two different buttons would be one option, or we would only put the payment on the view screen, or the edit screen, right? So they would have to go in here and then click pay. And that would give them, so they couldn't do it from the summary, right? This is a grid, but they couldn't do it from there. They would have to drill into it, then answer something, and then click pay.
Yeah, I like this last one. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And the same will be done for the vendor portal, right? So in this case, the customer is paying us, but can and I don't know if this makes sense, but can we submit a payment to the vendor? And
we usually don't put. Yeah, we usually don't put payment on a vendor portal because
they have their own. Yeah.
Maybe if they're issuing a refund, then you could say that might apply. But generally speaking, we are collecting payments on the customer side. We're not collecting payments on the vendor side, right? Because they're paying us.
Okay. Yes. Sure.
But,
I have a question there with the vendor portal. Is it okay, or you wanna continue?
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sure, and I'm thinking maybe we can give this access to our vendors, to our suppliers, and when they access, I don't know if this is how you use it, that's why I'm asking. They can see all the POs we have with them, and if they completed that PO, they can put their invoice on our site. Is that how it works?
Sure. So if I were to go into purchase orders, and then they could upload an invoice, right? And that would associate it to the PO.
Sure. And how
So
does
they
that
could-
work? The system check if the total amount is the same as the PO, and if it is, it goes to the account payable in Dynamics, or
No,
it has
I
to-
don't think it goes to the payables. I think he's referring to the document being uploaded.
So a document being uploaded can trigger a workflow. So if I wanted the workflow to take that invoice and, for sake of argument, create a PO match or an invoice match transaction, it could, if you wanted that, right? Because it is kicking off a Power Automate workflow of which I could perform actions in Dynamics using that workflow.
Okay. Is that how it's usually done? That people just submit an invoice, it triggers a system that somebody manually has to check and then associate it in Dynamics?
Usually no, because they want to compare that amount to what the invoice, you know, if I get a PO and it's $100 and I submit an invoice for 1,000, I am not going to accept that, right? So usually there's some validation that is included such that I could, you know, compare those amounts and make sure that it's within some threshold or satisfactory for me.
Okay, that makes sense. Sure, thanks.
Yeah, so I think you guys got it, right? Like really what we're calling is the integration objects of, you know, GP or any ERP such that I could show any data. That's really the premise or the foundation of the product, is it allows me to connect up with any information. And then with that information, I could tie that into workflows using Power Automate. And Power Automate provides actions to all kinds of systems, right? I showcased some DocuSign ones, but if I were to go to, you know, Power Automate and just look up the list of connectors that are provided, there's, you know, maybe thousands, if not hundreds. There's tons and tons of systems that I could tie into, including Microsoft, you know, GP, et cetera. So any action in the portal, you know, I could pass to workflow, I could hook up with payment providers, I could hook up to CRM systems, I could hook up to other document management systems, I could create tasks if I'm using a project management system. So that's really the premise of this portal product, is using this framework that is provided, you know, by Office 365, and the flexibility that that provides in A, exposing all information, and then B, creating a workflow that is, you know, specific to my business process. And, you know, I have other portals too. I've shown you two main ones, but I have, you know, manufacturing portals, I have service organization portals. This was a franchise portal that we created that was a donut franchise. So, you know, my pictures are all donuts and flour and stuff like that. But this is service calls and appointments. You know, this is manufacturing and production orders because they're using those modules, and that's what they wanted to use the portal to collaborate upon. So it is really a framework, if you will, for exposing any of that information and using these workflows to automate processes, whether it be accepting a payment or renewing a contract or onboarding or government forms, things like that.
Yeah, I think everyone catches the drift here,
Okay.
and I think the word exposing the data is quite the appropriate one. and then on. Of course, the closing is the first part, and then running along with it to automation. So okay, any more questions? We're gonna have like 30-45 seconds waiting for any other questions.
Cualquier otra pregunta, tenemos un poquito más de tiempo para responderles.
All the invoices and quotes that are updated, where do they save?
So anything that is updated, it could go directly, right? We could run that update statement immediately after it's updated in the portal, or we could do an approval action that requires a review before that update is performed.
Okay, and if a supplier submits an invoice through the platform, the actual invoice is saved in anywhere?
It could either be saved in SharePoint, or you could associate it to that transaction, say in Dynamics GP, if that's what you're using. So
Correct.
if you're using
That's what I thought. That's perfect.
Yeah. So GP gives us the ability to pass that to it as well.
Correcto. Se puede asociar, se puede subir al SharePoint en algún lugar, pero también se puede asociar específicamente al documento de GP, como se le pueden atachar documentos como tal, que de hecho es en la misma base de datos de SQL que se guardan.
Ok, excelente, gracias.
Siempre a la orden.
I have one question just for the general purpose of everyone. In the order entry part of customers, you obviously respect the pricing assigned to the customer in GP. Or let's say they have a special price level, and the prices will respect that logic on GP also, right?
Correct.
And
Yes.
one more. Obviously the items that show on the order entry, you can limit which items to show. Let's say you don't have stock of one of those items, you simply won't show on the list.
So we could do that in multiple ways. One is we just filter it. So if we say there's none available, then don't show it. Or you could use that association in GP of an item to a customer, right? Like on a price list, you get to associate those two.
Correct.
And you use that to filter it. So if that item is not set up on the price list for the customer, then of course they wouldn't see it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
One thing to note about the order entry is you could see this is not trying to be an e-commerce. It's not supposed to be Amazon, right? So you could do order entry, but it is typically geared to more of a business to business trend. It's not shopping carts and credit cards and things like that, right? It's not e-commerce site.
Correct. I think we
you guys get that.
Let me translate that just in case any of the Spanish. Lo que él dice es que esa parte de entrada de órdenes de clientes no está pensada en sustituir una página web de e-commerce normal, como un Shopify o algún tipo Amazon o algo así, sino que está pensada más en B2B, o sea, negocio a negocio, y hacer una orden obviamente de un cliente de crédito que ya te ha creado en el sistema, que tenga acceso al portal. No está pensado en un e-commerce normal, porque para eso hay otras plataformas mejores, pero sí te da esa posibilidad para negocios B2B.
Ok, yo creo que está bastante claro. I think this is good enough in terms of
overview.
The questions. I don't think I think that they were all of them were very good, and the answers quite GP compliant, which we like. So I'll just hand it over to you. So you might want to sign off, whatever.
Other than thanking everyone for their time, if there's any further questions, I'll go ahead and share email and our phone number. But I'm very grateful for everyone's time, and thank you for hosting us, Icon. I appreciate that as well.
No, on our side, we thank you guys for taking the time, to showcase your products, which we've known for a while, and I think the time is right for our particular market. So thanks, thanks for the attendees. Gracias a quienes sacaron su tiempo del día de hoy. Y agradecemos su visita.
Y claro, cualquier pregunta pueden escribirnos, si se acuerdan después, pueden escribirnos directo y les responderemos sus preguntas. Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Right, thank you.
Buen día. Okay.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot. Have a good
Bye.
day, everyone.